It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Sly, he's all.
I don't know about beer, but Sly just spilt Red Bull on me.
Well, listen, I've never seen Red Bull shoot 14 feet across the plaza here.
Hey,
at the
you guys never
Delta
had a
Center.
Red Bull shower. You haven't lived, my man.
Oh, things just got weird at the broadcast. We wouldn't have it any other way. Yes, this portion of the show, The Cut, brought to you by your Doug Smith dealerships in American Fork, Spanish Fork, and in Linden. Nobody knows cars like Doug. Nobody knows the Cougs like our own Mitch Harper, who is the BYU Insider, of course, for KSLSports.com, host of Cougar Sports Saturday, host of also Cougar Tracks you can catch on KSL News Radio as well. Mitch, thanks for being on the program, man.
You bet, guys. Happy to be on. I just got done chatting with Urban Meyer and Brady Quinn, and Urban said, because I asked him, where does this rivalry rank in the great rivalries in college football? Because he's been part of some great ones. And he said,
yeah.
This
Probably
one
the
has
biggest
to
one
be.
he's been a part of. Yeah.
He said this one might be the nastiest, and I thought, that is absolutely true because this game gets downright nasty, and I'm glad that college football landscape nationally is finally starting to put a spotlight on this game because for decades this used to just live on local TV. Really, until the last 15 years, is it become more of a national TV game, and now it gets a spotlight, stage, and I think it's going to be a really good game tomorrow. Looking forward to it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's something, right? Because Urban's saying that he's been a part of some really
Ohio State, Michigan, Florida,
Miami, Florida, Alabama,
Georgia.
Florida State.
Yeah.
But he's been a part of some of them. And if he says that,
Yeah, but it's some of that gamesmanship. He's actually been in this one too, like you were saying. But and maybe the key is the word nastiest because maybe it's because you're not expecting it. You expect there to be some foul stuff going on between Michigan and Ohio State fans. There's no way that the vitriol eclipses that, right? There's no way that the big game is eclipsed by what
I don't
BYU
know,
and
bro.
Utah
I've
delivers.
played in this thing. There's some nasty stuff.
I've covered this thing.
There's some stuff.
I've watched this thing, and I've covered this thing now for 20 years. The weirdest stuff you could come up with has happened in this rivalry.
Bro, I would
that's
say
such a
I
great
go to
point.
the league and I.
Has an Ohio State cheerleader ever pummeled a Michigan fan?
No, that's a good point. Mitch, when he said it, did you feel like it was less of the Urban Meyer just trying to get the crowd riled up for a big noon kickoff tomorrow?
Well, I followed up and asked him, I said, well, what do you think's caused the nastiness? Because, Urban even said that he ingrained himself in the game when he arrived. And, he said that Whittingham taught him a lot and everything. But he doesn't have exact reason or thing that he points to that caused the nastiness. But really, it goes back years. I mean, it wasn't with just Urban. I think a lot of Cougar fans look at Urban was the guy that, kind of kicked it in an overdrive. I disagree. I think this has been just going on forever. I mean, you go back in even the history books when BYU was getting it off the ground, there were fights then. I mean, that's 100 years ago. So this thing has always been intense. It's always been incredible. It always lives up to the price of admission. It's the most expensive ticket in college football, and it's going to live up to it. And I think that's what's so cool about this game. And I just think that having, when that, a power conference title potentially is on the line, at least a trip maybe to Arlington, the college football playoff. I mean, these are things that these programs were dreaming of, where, it was always kind of trying to knock the powers that be and break through to the BCS or get through the alliance and try to find workarounds to get there. Now the path is pretty clear, where you just got to take care of a game like this and take care of your schedule. You're going to have everything in front of you in college football, and I think that's what's so cool about this particular matchup is having two teams that are playing for so much, because we've never seen this before, and that's why I believe this is the greatest stakes rivalry game that we've ever seen, just because both teams have so much on the line. I think it's the highest stakes game since when Sly was playing in 2008, because BYU was a one-loss team that year. Utah was undefeated. Similar deal in this situation, but then you had a power conference stage. It magnifies the setting.
Agree with you, Mitch, 100%. This game has never been played on this stage with the stakes, with the records, with the rankings. This is an all-timer, and it has the potential to be an all-timer. Well, as you're looking at breaking down this matchup, what kind of feeling are you getting about the matchup here? Because we all understand the stage. Are these two teams going to put on a performance that's worthy of that stage?
I think it's going to be a defensive game. I always trust that there's going to be defense in this matchup. BYU hasn't scored 30 points or more in this series since the Johnny Harline game in 2006. By comparison, Utah since 2000 has had 8 games of 30 points or more. So if you turn to high-scoring outputs, it's more times than not Utah's the one that has those games. BYU for the last 2 decades, they're kind of living in that 24 points or less threshold, with a few exceptions like the one in 2021, the last meeting in Provo. I really think the defenses will shine, though. I think both defenses are 2 of the best in the Big 12, right there with Texas Tech, and I think they show up. And then it comes down to those turnovers. And it sounds so simple and so easy to point to, but really they are magnified in this game. +5 is BYU in the last 2 meetings in this rivalry. And no coincidence, BYU has won. You go back to 2019, the last time Utah won, BYU had 2 pick sixes in a game that was 30-12. If you take those away, maybe it's a little bit different ballgame. That was the one game where I point to and say, under Kalani, BYU was probably outclassed in 2019. I think that was Whittingham's best team, honestly, in my opinion. But I think that, but one thing that's for sure is that BYU's teams have always shown up under Kalani. They've been an underdog pretty much in all of these games since Kalani took the job, and they always show up. And I think an underdog BYU that's undefeated in their home crowd, BYU's in a pretty good spot, honestly, where they should go into this game pretty loose. Because I think that in the past too, in the early years with Kalani and Independence, it was almost like every game was in this series was an indictment on BYU's existence in the college football landscape, trying to keep up with their rival and prove it on the field, and just kind of magnified everything for them, and it made everything so tense. I kind of think BYU's going to be loose in this one, where all the pressure resides on the Utah side of things, in my opinion. So I think, then you got to execute. I'm curious to see, after the scripted plays, how this thing kind of plays out. And I'm really curious to see what Aaron Roderick scripts for Bear Bachmeier in this game early on. I can't imagine that they're going to run the ball 22 times with Bear, but they seem to be very comfortable running the football with Bear. I can't imagine it's up to 20, though.
What do you think that the biggest change has been for him just over the 6 games, Mitch? He's had to learn some tough lessons. And I brought it up during our show on 1st and 12 this week, and it was, he had the interception and the fumble, of course. The fumble less so in the West Virginia game, but the interception, that was a bad throw. But it didn't hurt his team. Those interceptions on Saturday hurt his team, and those are the types of things that obviously you learn a lot from. But what do you think the biggest growing up has been for Bear going 6-0 to start off his career at BYU? Well,
he's had to learn some harsh lessons because those turnovers were significant last week, and he darn near cost the game by putting the ball on the turf. If it wasn't for Kyle Safarchuk recovering that ball, that's game over, and he's taken an L because of that fumble. So ball security is amplified here, and Aaron Roderick noted this week that, he's been part of this game for 21 times now, and he even said it's turnovers. It is so key in this game. But I do think that Bear Bachmeier has shown an ability, the carry with Chase Roberts and Parker Kingston has improved, and you've seen some explosive plays. Parker Kingston told me this week he feels this is the most explosive the offense has been since he's arrived, and he's been at BYU since 2022. There's been some good quarterbacks in that stretch for that time, but they feel like this is the most explosive, and they feel like they're trending up the last 2 weeks in the passing game. BYU's had some big chunk plays, and I think they've got to deliver those. You can't expect, big plays or drives, against Utah's defense consistently. So you got to have a few kind of plays that break your way. Last week Parker Kingston broke free for a big touchdown. Chase Roberts 2 weeks ago, an 85-yarder against West Virginia. I don't know if you can expect 80-yard plays, but man, if you could break out a 40-yard, 50-yard reception, I think that could be the real difference here in a game that's so. The stats would suggest these teams are so similar. They want to run the football, the physicality, and I think just those big plays through the air could be a real difference. And BYU has been trending up in that regard, most of which coming from yards after catch, which is something of note there. So, how does Utah's secondary maybe defend BYU's receivers to prevent that from happening? That'll be something interesting to see. But BYU has had success with yards after catch this season.
How much did they miss Jack Kelly last week in Tucson, and how big of an impact does he need to have in this game for BYU to win?
I think it was huge because, when he was close to playing, he was going through all the warm-ups, and I saw him talking with the trainers. They had Dr. Skylar Maine, the guy with the mustache that works with a lot of athletes in NFL draft, preparation. And, there was a real conversation, and it was a true game-time decision. But, He ultimately goes to the sideline. I think that was the right move. He has been in a green no-contact jersey still this week, leaving the practice fields this week. So I'm really curious to see how his shoulder responds when he takes that first hit, when he's laying that contact on a Utah offensive player, and see how it responds. Because it's been, he has practice, but no contact jersey for him, that jersey that the quarterbacks typically wear. But I think his absence was significant just because, I think back to what Kelly Papinga told me a few weeks ago, that the defense, because I asked him about the defensive ends and how they haven't had a sack, and that was going into the West Virginia game, and still to this day they don't have a sack yet. But he noted that the defense is funneled to Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker to make plays. And, it's very simple, but they are the playmakers. They are the guys that generate the pressure. If you're going to have someone that can stop Devin Dampier off, to get outside and go off for, last week he had 2 runs, Dampier did, of 24 and 22 yards. To avoid those sort of plays, Jack Kelly's your best bet. And then Glasker alongside him, they work so well off each other. It's critical to have Jack Kelly back in the lineup. Ace Kafusi's really good, and he's got a bright future ahead of him at BYU, the guy that replaced Jack Kelly last week. But just as far as the knowledge of the scheme, what Jay Hill expects from that player, from Jack Kelly at that linebacker spot, there's no one like him. He's irreplaceable. And so having him back in the lineup will be huge for BYU. Again, curious to see how he kind of responds in that pregame warm-up. But Jay Hill's saying that they expect him to go. I would expect that as well.
Mitch, any other things that stood out on the injury report on either side that might be of interest to some fans who are following this one?
Tommy Parasis being out for BYU catches my attention. Now, he has been out the past 2 weeks. He's the starting nickel for BYU. But it kind of creates an opportunity potentially to see the debut of Jonathan Cabella. And Cabella has been a name that maybe has been forgotten, but there was a lot of preseason expectation and hype for Cabella until he suffered a fall camp injury that's kept him sidelined. He went through pregame warmups last week against Arizona, looked pretty good, but they ultimately did not play him. He hasn't been on the media availability report. And Cabella is kind of like the next Eddie Heckard to me. And similar size, 5'10", 5'11". And Jay Hill was really high on Cabella coming out of spring football and early on in camp until the injury. We could see the debut of him. They've also got Tavion Beasley from San Diego State as well, who's filled in for Parasis the past 2 weeks. But I think that absence is just noteworthy because it creates a little opportunity for Cabella to make his debut in this spot. And then, of course, doubtful with Raider DeMooney. He remains there. He took a hit to the rib cage, a helmet shot from Cialia Serra in the first quarter against Arizona. He went to the sideline, did not return. They have not seen him around practice this week. Again, don't know if he was going through practice or not. He just wasn't at the practice during the media periods, and he remains doubtful there. So that would leave BYU with Faletau Satawala, which is not bad because Satawala is a heck of a playmaker. And it also, their second unit still remains pretty good with Talon Alfrey, who hasn't played much this year, but he becomes that backup, and they trust him. So the depth has been shining because a guy like DeMooney being out, you'd think, oh, no, that position takes a big dip. I think they kind of go business as usual and maybe a little more athletic on the back end with Satawala playing there full time.
Yeah, I love Faletau Satawala. JJ, I know we've been talking about that guy since he was a sophomore in high school. But I mean, I like just sitting back listening. This is the thing about this game. These are two teams that we followed every single week. There's not much new stuff that we're going to be able to talk about with these guys. Health report is always great. But for me, in these Holy War rivalry games, you can throw the book out the window, man. It's the analysis is going to be whatever it is. This game's going to be weird at the end of the day. But Mitch, I'm really kind of looking forward to, like, what have you seen from Bear this week as far as fielding questions? What type of vibe? I know you probably paid attention to how he looks, how he's answering, how comfortable he is. What have you heard or seen from Bear this week that is getting him ready for this game tomorrow?
Well, I think that, he's, gotten to know what this rivalry is about. And, I think so much is made on the Utah side. I think for fans, they think that just Utah's just, all in on this game. Like, it's BYU too. Like, this thing is so intense on both sides. And I think, Bear, they've kind of kept him off the mic this week. He did do a national interview this week. But, by all accounts, they've kind of kept him away from the local media because, he's sometimes a young guy. I remember in fall camp where he's talking about his grandpa having, Camel cigarettes and things like that. So they're avoiding any sort of potential, off-the-cuff comment that could be bulletin board material. And maybe that's the move that
I'll take it.
It's a smart move, I guess. But I think Bear,
Utah fans are like, we're Marlboro people. He knows that.
It was interesting. It was interesting. I've tried to avoid this comparison because it's so kind of cliche But, hearing another quarterback who's been through it and experienced it as a true freshman, Brady Quinn, who just spoke with us a few moments ago, he said that he sees Tim Tebow in Bear. And you kind of think about that, and it's like, yeah, you can kind of see it at times.
Physically, yeah.
Because he's a guy that can run the football a lot, and he's a pretty good passer, too. I still am curious to see, like, that big arm of Bear. I don't know if I've seen that as much. Again, the yards after catch have kind of shined with Bear, but I think the biggest thing, too, is he's really won over the locker room because BYU had a lot of mature guys in that group, and I think they feel like they have a team that was so close last year to winning the Big 12, and they didn't want this freshman to come in and mess it up. And so far, he hasn't, to the point where they feel like they might be even better than last season. And I think he's won over that locker room with how tough he plays. And, he showed a little bit of clutch factor, too, last week to come up with 2 touchdown runs with the game on the line. Again, got to clean up the putting the ball on the turf. But by all accounts, I think he's just kind of won over this team, and this team kind of follows his lead. And he is the leader. Him and L.J. Martin are the leaders of this team. And they will go as far as BYU will as they will take them. BYU will. So I think it's a huge stage for him. But I think he also, I don't think he's been fazed by anything. He's just kind of a calm guy. I think the quarterback battle didn't faze him at all. All these kind of checkpoints of first game, first Power 4 opponent, first Big 12 game, he's kind of handled it well. And this is the toughest test to date, no question. But I would expect that he'll be pretty poised, and he even showed last week when facing adversity, down 10 points with 11 minutes to go. He still settled in, put together a methodical drive of 7 minutes, a little bit slower than I would have put together, but still, he put it together and did what Aaron and Roderick expected him to do, and he got it done. So I would expect more of the same from Bear, and I think, like you said, Sly, I think it's going to come down to the wire, and I think maybe the biggest question is, like, what sideshow antic are we going to see from this game that emerges from it? But this thing always lives up to it, and I can't wait for the next edition of this Holy War matchup.
Yeah, something crazy and memorable is sure to happen. Another thing that always happens, Mitch, is there's always a player that becomes legendary in these games.
Great
sometimes
point.
It's a key name, but sometimes it's somebody we don't know. Will Farron was that hero for BYU last year. In 2021, it was Jaron Hall. You look on the Utah side, people know who Mo Lee is. I don't think he had another play that I can remember in Utah history, but everybody remembers that game and that play. Who's the guy for BYU on Saturday you look at and think, that could be a guy that makes a big play in this rivalry game? This is a guy that could be key to them getting a win as opposed to getting it going the other way.
I could see, if you want to go kind of a deep cut, maybe like a Preston Rex, they draw something up for him. Some big play to, he got a 16-yard catch last week. Again, I don't know how much they're going to turn to him actually carrying the football. Last week, 2 carries, and really, I think it was only 1 yard in those 2 carries. But in the receiving game, he showed a little bit of something. And I think it's something that, maybe Whittingham and his staff probably had to take note of in their preparation for this game. But, maybe BYU could dial up something for a guy like Preston Rex or even Cody Hagan, who's been so good on those reverse plays this year. 2 times he's taken it to the house. If he could do that again, that makes him a legend. And, he's barely played. He's played a lot, but he hasn't had the big numbers yet. That would put him in BYU lore. And you bring up Will Farron, it's funny because every home game this year, and even last year, the senior days and things like that, he gets the biggest cheers. And it's, not because of the streaks he's had, not because of all the makes, just that one make, because of what he did against Utah. And I think that's what's interesting to me in this game is just any sort of little mistake, like a simple drop that Chase Roberts experienced against Stanford, that gets magnified in this game because people will remember it forever. You can kind of forget those moments over time after a win against a team like Stanford, but in BYU, Utah, that gets ramped up, and then how to mentally you respond to that adversity and bounce back and just move on to the next play, because even Parker Kingston told me that those sort of things, everything is tense in this sort of game, because the emotions are so high, and how can you move forward to the next play and just kind of dial in and make sure to execute the play that's being called and do it right and not make a mistake, because everyone will remember it and everyone's on notice in this one, because the spotlight's huge. I mean, just driving down here to Provo today, you see all the, all these different businesses and billboards of BYU Utah theme, haunted forest, this and that. Like, it's all, this state is all in on this game. They are ready for it, and it's so awesome to see. And it's one of those sporting events that it is the sporting event that just makes everyone pay attention in this state. It's so awesome. Can't wait for it.
Who would be, this is just a hypothetical here, and I know our producer's trying to get us out. Who would be the scariest person for a Ute fan in a BYU haunted forest, a BYU rivalry-themed haunted forest?
Oh, man.
Think about it. You know who it is?
Johnny Harleen?
What about
I don't know.
What about
Oscar
zombie?
Mayer
What about, for BYU fans, what about zombie suspenders guy? There you go. That could
Son, or just suspenders guy.
Just suspenders guy.
He doesn't need to be a
Doesn't
zombie.
even need to be zombie.
A zombie Coca-Cola.
Oh, my goodness.
What can you say? What can you say?
Oh, my gosh. I was 8 feet from that, and I
I'll
was like,
never forget that.
I think
it was the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced in my
Is
life.
Bronco Mendenhall going to have to punch a guy?
I've seen Bronco in a lot of moods.
That was
dark.
He stopped.
That was dark.
He stopped in his tracks. Mitch, thanks for hanging out.
He almost
with us.
committed a crime.
Thanks for hanging out with us. That's a quick, easy, clickable idea for you to put something up on KSL Sports tonight. If you want to have a haunted forest theme article up tonight, you can do it.
I'm on it, guys.
As if Mitch isn't worn out already from writing everything about
We'll
this.
see you tomorrow, man. Get your blue cougar tails, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Alex, JJ, Sly, you guys are the best. Thanks.
There you go. Oh my gosh. Yeah, honestly though, that's a great thought. Who's the scariest guy in the rivalry side of the forest for BYU and for Utah? Think about it. We'll come back with more nominations next. We also have our NFL Blitz coming up next, so you don't want to miss any of that either. It's a Football Friday.
Joe Flacco. Oh,
Oh, that's a haunted forest, and he is a zombie almost.
I was texting you
Basically
guys last
dead.
night. I'm like, who's this Aaron Rodgers guy?
I'm
doing
laughing
Yeah.
my butt off as I'm getting those texts.
He's like the Undertaker rising from the grave.
This guy's unhinged.
Gets
All right, we'll
tackled
take
by
a break.
his own lineman.
We'll come back. More to go. 97.5 KSL Sports Zone.